B2B buyers are leaving clues on the web that they are in market. Can you find them? This is Hellbent on Intent, where we sit down with experts, users, and skeptics to get to the bottom of intent data. Our goal is to break down what intent data is, what it isn't, how it works, and what it means for B2B technology marketers. My name is Tukan. Let's get to it. Great. Hello, everyone. My guest today is David Crane. David's the VP of Marketing at Intentsify. Welcome to the show, David.
Thanks for having me.
Very good. Do you want to give a brief background about yourself and how you have been involved in the whole intent data industry?
Yeah, so 11, 12 years ago now, I kind of fell into B2B marketing. And I started at a platform that was really all about connecting channels, but really working through content syndication. And as time went on, intent data about 5, 6, 7 years ago started to become a new product in the category. And that vendor started using intent data to target specific accounts for content syndication programs. And I saw a lot of value in that. It was a small feature of that company. And then I left that company 4 years ago, and then I joined Bombora, a great company. I still have a lot of respect for the people working over there and the product as well. And after working there for a little over a year in product marketing, I was recruited to join Intentsify, which actually works really well with Bombora. Because what Intentsify does is we aggregate a whole bunch of intent data signals to layer those signals to kind of see which signals being corroborated and which aren't, so that a marketer, salespeople can act on the ones that are verified. So they're the stronger signals. And that's kind of what the heart that we do here in Intentsify. But I've really been working in the B2B MarTech space for over a decade now, but focused on intent data for about 4 years now, I think.
The first question that I had for you, David, is we say this at LeadSift, and I've heard you guys mention, and we've seen other people talk about it too, that there is no single source of intent data. Marketers need to look at multiple sources. I know you guys published a state of intent data report, and it said something in like high 80% of marketers use more than one source of intent. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. So what we found in a report we came out about a year ago, and we're actually fielding the second annual report right now. So we should be coming out with that the next month or so. But what we found is actually among B2B marketers currently using intent data, so users of intent data, 89% of those B2B marketers are currently using 2+ sources.
Okay.
But as far as how many B2B marketers that we surveyed are actually using intent data itself, it was 59% are currently using intent data, and another 23% were actually developing strategies for the use of intent data. So another 23% on top of 59% plan on using intent data. But going back to the 89% of intent data users that use 2+ sources, it's really impressive because a further 71% of those intent data users are using 3+ sources, and 44% are using 4+ sources. And what this really shows is that more and more B2B organizations know that they need the breadth from numerous sources. One source of intent data usually comes from one vendor who has a specific part of the market. So you're going to get skewed results if you're only looking at that one piece of the total amount of online research that's occurring. If you use another source of intent data, you're probably getting people who are actually looking at other websites or performing other activities on social media, perhaps. So the more source of intent data, the larger breadth you get. But more than just that, you can corroborate those signals. You can verify them. So if you're using 4 sources of intent data, 3 of them are all giving signals that say the same thing, and one's saying something else, you're going to act on the signals that are corroborated against those 3 sources. Understood. So that's what more and more B2B companies are seeing. That it's like one source is probably better than none, obviously. But the more you get, the more you can substantiate the signals, the more accurate they're going to be, and the better, more impact they're going to have in any use case you're using those signals for.
Understood. One question in this survey that you guys did, what was the kind of companies, what kind of companies did you look at?
I'd have to look for the actual exact targeting, but it was, I think they were largely in the tech industry, but also in the finance industry, telco, and I think healthcare as well. They typically had, I think, 10 million in annual revenue, maybe more than that. But yeah, it's kind of maybe 20 million actually. But we didn't want the really small companies. We want to at least kind of get into the mid market and above there.
So that's great, David. So what you're finding is, B2B tech companies are at least 10 million plus in revenue. 59% of them are using some form of intent. Out of those that are using some form of intent, close to 90% of them are using 2 or more. And then 41% are using 4 signals or something. So
yes.
Great time to be in the intent data space, I guess.
What's great is I'm not sure if that's going to hold up this year. I'm waiting to see the findings on that. Yeah. Because I think there has been some mergers and acquisitions, and that's always happening. But I think some of the smaller intent data players are probably being sucked up in the last year by larger ones. So that may be reducing them as well. Also, in this year's report, we're not just targeting B2B marketers. We actually added on B2B sales and customer success as well. So we're going to have to segment that out to see. I wouldn't be a bit surprised if some sales teams are using intent data, but they don't know they're using intent data because they're just targeting those accounts, and marketing, who is using intent, is telling them to target. So there's going to be ways to read this new report that should be quite interesting.
Very interesting. I guess moving on to this whole concept of leveraging multiple sources of intent. If you're a practitioner, if you are getting these different signals, how do you go about combining these different signals? Because as you mentioned, they're all looking at very different sources of data, and they're probably scoring them or calculating intent in very different ways. If you're a practitioner, you get this. How do you combine them and then activate it?
Well, it actually does create quite a bit of a challenge, because anytime you're comparing anything, you want to compare apples to apples.
Sure.
But a lot of these intent vendors, for good or bad, they use different methodologies for deriving those signals and also for scoring them as well. Yeah. So, I mean, you want to keep all the variables as close together as possible. Your target accounts, the topics you're tracking, the keywords you're tracking, and scoring models and so on. But you can only go so far because they come out with different scoring methodologies. Yeah. But it could also be very difficult to do that, to really compare. That same survey, we found that 64% of intent users say that they had major challenges converting data to insights and verifying the accuracy of those insights, and almost a third claim to have trouble putting intent signals into action. That's kind of the reason in Intentsify why we're laying all the signals into an aggregate score. But at the same time, you want to see the individual scores from the various intent sources too, because certain types of intent data, intent signals, may be more powerful for certain use cases as well. Yeah. For example, if a certain intent data vendor allows you to has more broad topics related to challenges in the market, that's going to be great for top of the funnel use cases because that's going to be challenge oriented. But if some vendors are allowing you to target very specific niche products or brands by customized keywords, that's really indicative if people are searching on those at their late in their buying stage because they're looking at specific brands and products and features and so on. So you want to have those individual signals available to see as well, but also it's good to have an aggregate score.
Got it. So now let me ask you this question around scoring. It's a very interesting topic, I find it. I know Bombora, they mentioned that they consider anything above 60 a surging account, and that's. Do you think from a marketer's perspective, whether they're looking at it in isolation of different intent scores or combined, how much of a difference does actually score make versus, hey, there is a signal in these sources, now do something?
It's hard to say because there's two main scoring ways. There's the one like Bombora that's based on the index. So at a 50%, that means there's no change against the historic baseline. So if they're at a 60, that means against our historical baseline, they're above that, which is great because you may see a lot of activity from one account, but if there's always a lot of activity, does that really mean that they have any more intent? Yeah. At the same time, if that current level of activity is just one signal a month, does that show intent or not? If it goes from one typical signal a month to 2, they doubled the signals. If it's going to 2 from 1, does that really mean anything? So that's kind of the event type scoring where you're just scoring individual intent events. So it's kind of good to have both, but the problem is you can't compare apples to apples in that way.
Yeah, and that is the challenge. So you guys, when you guys are presenting this data, you are combining them into an aggregate score?
Yes, and we have a weighting process and algorithm that puts all that into effect. Plus, also when we're running content syndication campaigns or programmatic, all those signals, how they're actually engaging with those kind of channels, factors into the aggregate score as well. But we know that a lot of marketers need to be more specific. They need to slice and dice the data for specific use cases. So we also allow them to see the individual intent scores from each source.
Understood. And I don't know if you have this answer off the top of your head, David. Have you seen any difference when a marketer acts on a lead that is, at 65 versus something at 75 or 80? Like, is there a significant difference that you notice?
Not that I've noticed personally, but it's so
Yeah.
hard to say because there's so many variables. I mean, did the marketing team or the sales team using the data, did they pick the right topics that they should be tracking? Is it the best fit for their offering? That's just one way to look at the problem with knowing whether 65 next to 70, but it also has to do with volume because that index scoring may be based on a lower volume of signals relative to a higher volume of signals too.
Understood. Okay. So now let's move to the next part of it. One of the most common things of sort of actioning the intent data from a marketing perspective we see is B2B marketers are running lead generation programs via content syndication that is backed by intent. So, intent data, whether it's single source or multi-sources saying, hey, these are the accounts that are showing intent around your topics or competitors. Now do lead gen by doing content syndication. That is a very common method. Now, before we go into the details of it, I'd love to understand, how are content syndicated leads normally generated? Like, how are they normally syndicated?
Well, it depends on the media company, the media partner, the publisher, whatever you want to call them. Each one has different tactics that they use, and they use them to their own strengths. Generally, they have a huge database of contacts, business contacts in certain verticals, right?
Okay.
Some of them just like to really email their database with these offers through various brands who have their ebook or webinar that they want to syndicate. Other ones use programmatic to bring them to the landing pages. Others use telemarketing, and they just play to their own strengths. But generally speaking, with intent data, they allow you to target those specific accounts with those offers, so you don't have to pay for a lead unless it's generated from that intent identified account.
Understood. So you're saying it's a mix of email marketing to a subscriber list that they have generated, or driving people to a specific landing page via ads, I'm guessing, and or telemarketing.
Telemarketing, social, programmatic, anything that could get people to sign up for that offer, but they want it to be from those specific intent identified accounts to get paid. So just one more targeting criteria.
Exactly. So now the key question there you said is sign up. Do people normally need to sort of download that asset, that content that is being syndicated, or if they just visit the website, read up a description and then bounce without giving them the email or something? Would that
generally speaking, I mean, for the programs we run in Intentsify, they actually have to provide their contact information to get it.
So they have to explicitly give their first name, last name, email, or something like that.
Yeah, and any other fields that are requested to be on there. Obviously, the more fields that they have to fill out, the higher the CPO.
Got it. And the reason I asked this is we did a content syndication program through an outsourced media company. They run demand gen or lead gen, and we were doing a webinar. And in that, we basically said, hey, we want to drive attendees to this webinar. We have a registration form, but they created their landing page and they drove traffic, and we got 51 leads in a week, which is, we wanted 35, we got 51, which is great. And it's good price. But one of the things that we found was a lot of these people and they were all perfect ICP fit. One of them was the CMO of Gainsight. I clearly remember. And I looked at that. I'm like, there's no way the CMO of Gainsight signed up for LeadSift's webinar. They don't know. So we reached out to all of them and nobody replied.
Really?
And why do you think that might have happened? Do you think there's a problem with the quality of the way their people are doing, or?
It could be. I don't know. I mean, I know that that at Intentsify, and I know other content syndication providers too, it's not just us, I don't want to claim it, but we have a strong lead verification process that, you ping the email address, make sure it's a working email address, they verify the phone number, they deduplicate so they're not generating the same leads over and over. They have volume capping, so you're not getting too many leads from the same account, or, there's all these different types of lead quality processes that they go through. But sending over something like that when you can't follow up with it, it seems like it's clearly not a right lead. That seems kind of sketchy. But
do you see, like, if someone is thinking of content syndication, is there an easy way for someone to validate that, whether it's intent or non-intent? Is there an easy way for a marketer to validate that, these guys are giving us real data?
There are software that you could get and that will do that. I mean, we have included with our programs that we do it, but I would say if you're going to any content syndication provider, make sure you ask about their lead quality checks. What do they do to make sure that those leads are who they say they are, and that it was actually a warm lead, that they download that piece of content, that it's not just data dumping, that's a working email address, working phone number, and anything else. So they should be able to provide you with all these verification steps that they take to make sure that they're giving you what they say they're giving you. But when it comes down to it, most B2B marketers these days, they're not just their success isn't based on just how many leads are generated. It's how many leads are converting to MQLs or sales accept leads or opportunities. So if those leads aren't converting, they're not going to have much business. So that's a very bad business plan of the publisher that's not providing that.
That's a one and done kind of thing. So speaking about this, and this is, I know we were chatting about this earlier, was one thing that we hear from a lot of marketers. They go, like, the workflows goes such: I have an ebook, I do content syndication, or like a piece of content, I use intent to figure out which accounts are showing intent around that topic. I give it to that list, the content syndicator or publisher. They drive traffic, we get these leads. I give it to my sales team. They call them up. Nobody bought or booked a demo. The intent is bad. B, the content syndication leads are garbage. That's something that we have seen quite a few times. Big. And I'm guessing you're nodding. So
definitely. I mean, I've been on calls, and they run these programs. They get these leads that are from these intent identified accounts, and they're like, why aren't they converting? Like, well, did you put them into a nurture track? Did you score them before handing them over? So it's like, no, they're intent qualified. So I hand them right over to sales. Like, just because they're intent qualified doesn't mean they're ready to buy, especially if the intent topics, keywords you use to identify those accounts are based on challenges. That means that those accounts, they just know they have a challenge or problems, and they're looking to solve them right now. Doesn't mean they're ready to buy. So really, with content syndication, when buyers download these pieces of content, provide their business contact info, they're just really engaging with your ideas around solving a problem. They may not always remember the brand that they got the email from. So what you need to do is put them in a nurture track, and make sure that you go from that beginning of their buyer journey, where you're trying to explain the challenges that they're trying to solve, and just give them the solid thought leadership to help them out, and gradually they'll become more interested in various solutions to automate the solutions to those problems, tech solutions. Then gradually they're going to be ready to know about your specific brand, your specific product. That's when you send them over to sales. But just like anything else, you can't jump a step just because it's intent identified. And that kind of brings up a whole nother topic of how the industry tends to think about the value of intent data. There's really two main values of intent data. One, it allows you to target the right accounts, to know where to put your resources, to put your time, your energy. Two, it shows you how to engage with them. What topics, what keywords or challenges they're concerned with, what solutions they're looking at, in some cases, what brands they're already looking at. But you see what they're surging on. If they're surging on just a challenge or a problem, that means they're going to be at the beginning of their buyer's journey. You want to use messaging and content that really focuses on those top funnel challenges. But if they're surging really on specific brands, specific products, that's when you know, they may be a little further down their buyer's journey. You want to use messaging and content that's like case studies that show how you are better than your competitors. but you want to use those signals to select the right messaging and content and channels to engage them. It's not just about targeting, it's about how you want to engage those accounts. And a lot of B2B organizations don't realize that second value yet.
Understood. So what you're saying is one of the biggest, like a gap sort of, is marketers expect these intent qualified leads that are being generated. They're not sales ready. They need to be nurtured. Is that an accurate
It
statement?
depends. I mean, really, I mean, if you have a scoring methodology in your marketing automation system, you would, like, we use intent data to help score leads. If they have a certain CERT or intent score, we get account scoring in HubSpot that tells us whether it's ready to be sent over to sales. But it's also how many pieces of content they may have downloaded, how many times they may have engaged us on social media, if they visit our website, if they're in our ICP or persona. So it's just one scoring criteria. It may be ready to send over. It has all these other scoring that's on there,
Agreed.
but it's one.
But not in isolation. Meaning, if you just see someone showed intent and downloaded a piece of content without looking at anything else, they're not ready to be passed to sales. They need to be nurtured.
Typically not. Not unless you may already be working a key target account that
True.
you know, and that you've already have a relationship with them, and you see those signals are surging really high for a competitor product or competitor brand. You may want to try and get in there at that point.
Understood. And when you say nurture, David, what kind of nurture should marketers do? Is it targeted ads towards those accounts, those contacts, or email nurture, or a combination?
Well, I don't think it's a one size fits all. And I think that's also kind of a problem in the industry. It's a whole different conversation. So everyone's like, so what are you doing? What are your conversion benchmarks? It's like, well, that's all variable based on your product or your type of business. And people are always thinking, especially when it comes to conversion rates between leads, MQLs, sales accepted leads, because whatever your scoring model is based on, if you keep your conversion scores low, that means your rates are going to go up. But if you make that criteria really hard, your scoring criteria, that means your conversion rates are going to go down. And everyone's scoring methodology is different. So should you really have benchmark conversion rates? Understood.
So now you mentioned something is, marketers are not really measured on number of leads that are generated, because that's sort of easy. You give it to someone, they generate leads, but that doesn't mean much.
Less and less. I'd say in the tech industry, which typically kind of leads the way on being more cutting edge with these processes and strategies, more and more B2B marketers in the tech space, at least, are being really, their performance is being judged on opportunities, if not revenue.
Totally. Okay. So now that's great. So now in theory, what you're saying is, rather than running, just blanket spray and pray content syndication, use intent data to drive your lead gen via content syndication, what kind of efficiency is it creating? Is it cheaper CPL, which I doubt it is, but is it more cheaper cost per opportunity, or does it help with the pipeline velocity? What are you guys seeing?
Well, I think it all comes down to efficiency. If you know who you're targeting, what they care about, you're going to select the right content, the right assets, and you're going to follow up with the right messaging. So everything's going to be working much better because you know what they care about. You know that they're already researching problems. You know how to follow up with them. So you should be more effective, more successful in the tactics you're using to get them through the funnel.
Okay. So in your experience, David, when working with customers, what are the improvements that you've seen someone leveraging intent with content syndication have? Like, can you share any stats?
Usually have what I call is like a messaging and content matrix. So you have all the various stages of the buyer's journey, which are customizable to every individual organization. But just like you would have these product lines and by persona, and then you would have the keywords or topics that you use for each one of them attached to various messages and content. So you can map if a certain account and certain persona is really surging really high on a certain topic or keyword, you know what to use, what content, what messages to use with them. That way, basically is helping make sure that you give these prospects the information they need when they need it. That's really what it comes down to.
So this is, I remember this, we were one of our customers, I think they probably used you guys they're a large enterprise company. And one of the things that director of marketing operations mentioned was, in theory, that makes sense that, you look at what topics or topic clusters or themes they're showing intent on, and then show them that kind of content. And one of the challenges that she mentioned was, they don't have that many diverse pieces of content based on, do you, so two questions. Do you see that when someone is trying to do content syndication in that way, like having a very well-defined set of content associated with the topics or things that are showing intent, and B, if they don't, what's the workaround?
Well, I don't think it has to be that sophisticated necessarily. I mean, from a simple point of view, if like I said, if they're really, if you're seeing in the intent signals that they're surging on challenges, don't feed them a case study. But something like that. But if you see that all the topics, keywords that they're really spiking on have to do with brands or specific products or something that shows late stage, you probably don't want a top of funnel ebook. They already know their challenges and problems. They want to know how you're going to solve them. So it's as simple as that. I mean, if you have more personas and more pieces of content for each one of them, okay, you're going to be more sophisticated and more complex with the messages and content you're using. But really, I mean, you could make this as general as just making sure you're getting the right type of content, the right stage, the buying process after it.
Got it. So basically, at a minimum, have two categories of content: top of funnel, bottom of funnel, and based on the intent signal, maybe the score or the kind of intent, as you said, if it's a brand engagement, like a competitor engagement, give them the lower funnel, versus if it's a top funnel, they're more, I guess, problem aware rather than buyer aware. Just share with them like high level ebook, like that kind of. Got it.
Yeah, I think so. I think you could probably want to do more like top, middle, and bottom. And there's always a little bit of overlap there too. But yeah, I think that, I mean, you don't have to have it all broken down by, it doesn't have to be as granular as what you see sometimes online about what the big enterprise accounts are doing. Because obviously the big enterprise companies have numerous lines of business. They have a lot of different content, they have a lot of different messaging and value props. But for a startup, for instance, they're probably going to have one product focusing on one or two personas, but that they could still have content for 3 different stages of the buyer's journey. That's not too difficult to do.
Understood. And in terms of benchmarks, what kind of benchmark should a marketer look for when they're running these content syndication programs backed by intent? Like, what would be a good benchmark for them?
Well, that goes back to, I think I made a comment that a few minutes ago, is people want to see, well, what conversion rate from MQL to opportunity should I be looking at? Like, well, that really depends on the scoring model that you're using. But really, I would say don't try to target a specific conversion rate percentage. Like 1 month, look at where you're at. Look at what conversion rates you have. Set that as your benchmark and just try to improve. You may, I mean, if you're finding that you have a huge, like really high conversion rate from leads to MQL, but MQL or but from SAL to opportunity is really low. Maybe you're setting the bar too low to be scored as the MQL. Maybe you want to set that bar a little higher, or maybe you want to set the bar a little lower from the SAL to opportunity rate. So you're going to be shifting your scoring models so that you're a little bit more in line. But saying another company is doing it a specific way compared to you, it's different because their scoring models are different. So you can't really say that they all want to have the same conversion rate.
Totally. So now let me ask a question and I don't know if you can answer this with specific numbers, David. So when someone typically running a content syndication program, they typically have a lead number in mind, right? Like 200 leads within this account or something. Is that sort of, or X?
Yeah, for no other reason, it's for budget, because they got so much budget to work with,
right?
And they have good CPLs, like, okay, with this many leads.
A finite number. So let's say someone is running a program, intent-driven lead gen via content syndication. Let's say you generate 500 leads in a month. Whatever the scoring mechanism is after they do, so they nurture. If I'm a marketer, over a period of 6 months, let's say that's my sales cycle, how many of these 500 leads should I expect to become an opportunity? Is it 50? Is it 400? Is it 10? Like roughly just to set expectations.
I can't even tell you that. I wish I could, but that all comes back to, do they really know what their ICP is? Is their target account list as good as it could be? I mean, so much is based on their overarching strategy. A lot of companies, I mean, really good companies, their ICP is not right. Maybe it originally was, but the market has changed their needs, or they pivoted their offering, or so it should affect the ICP. But I mean, if from the very beginning they're not targeting the right type of accounts, it's not going to be right. So I don't think I could really answer that.
And that's fair. The reason I ask is one thing we understand with intent data is there is going content syndication or not, there is a little bit of a misaligned expectation. I don't know, the way the market is set up, people think, okay, these are intent driven leads, they're going to convert at a very high percentage. So we need to set some realistic expectations compared to that baseline. What I'm trying to say is it, should marketers expect a good, assuming they have a defined ICP, is it fair for them to expect a high opportunity number from those leads, higher percentage of them?
It should definitely be higher. It should definitely, to what extent, I'm not sure. I mean, I off the top of my head, I know that one of our top enterprise customers saw a 35% jump in marketing driven pipeline after using intent driven content syndication.
What do you mean by that, David? 35% jump
against other lead gen campaigns,
okay,
using the same spend, there was a 35% jump in marketing driven pipeline using the intent data from Intentsify.
Got it. So if they generated leads from some other way and they generated leads from Intentsify, and when they were nurturing them, this group that was using intent data from Intentsify and its partners was converting 35% more, or contributing 35% more for the same CPL spend.
And the same account had a 1 to 200 spend to pipeline ratio, which is pretty impressive too.
So for every dollar spent, they were getting $200 in pipeline contribution. Wow.
I said the same thing. And then a mid-market account, they had a 10-time pipeline to spend ratio. So also not as good as the other one, but and their average deal size doubled, and they had a 9 times jump in MQL to pipeline ratio.
Why would the average deal size increase because of intent? Why would you think?
I'm gonna go and assume, but I don't know specifically. But what I would think is they know what those prospects care more about, so they're getting the right information and the right solutions that they should be using. And so if you give them the right information so they can make the right decisions, they're going to actually spend more money because they feel more, that's the word I'm looking for, more confident in what they're buying.
100%. One final question for you, David, is, so you take intent, lead gen via content syndication is a tactic. It's a pretty well-known tactic, as we can see a lot of marketers do these things. What do you think of taking the same set of accounts, instead of doing content syndication, run targeted display ads or paid social across these accounts without running a content syndication? Do you see that? A, do you see that as a tactic marketers are using? And B, how does that compare with content syndication programs?
I think they should be used together. I don't think you should really ever use one or another, because generally speaking, I know some people will argue with you on this, but programmatic, even when it's targeted through intent data, it's really a branding play, because a lot of people just don't click on display ads. But there still serves a purpose about being top of mind. So if you have the right messaging in those banners, it gets people thinking. At the very least, they'll see your logo and they'll remember it. So when they do about to download an ebook or something from a publisher, like, oh, I saw that somewhere. They brought up something of mine. So it's that awareness. They work in tandem really well.
Very interesting.
Yeah, and if you're targeting the same accounts with the same messages, you're just circling them. So they're more likely to download that piece of content through content syndication, and they're more likely to be interested in it. And then if they read a piece of content and you hit them with programmatic later, they may be more likely to click on that ad and get some other piece of content too. So it's another way to surround them in a way that's targeted with the same messages based on the intent signals that you're seeing.
Understood. Now let me ask, I just thought of something. This is a fascinating topic. So when someone is running a content syndication program, you identify a certain set of accounts showing intent, they run a content syndication program. How long do they typically last? A month, 2 months, 90 days? What's the typical span, David?
It really depends. I think typically a lot of publishers like to run for like a good quarter, good 3 months, but you could have one inside 1 month if you needed to. But you gotta keep on. If your volume is really high, how many leads that you're buying could take more time, especially if it's targeting certain accounts. If you have a target account list, say of 2,500 accounts, and intent data finds that out of that 2,500, 700 of them are showing like they're in market at really good intent signals. All right, so you have 700 accounts to target for content syndication, but you want 1,500 leads. All right, that means that it's going to take some time to fulfill that order because you only have 700 accounts. You want all those leads. You're not going to get them all in 1 month. It's just not going to happen.
So after they have, let's say after month, 2 months, or 3 months, they have gotten their lead goal of 1,500. How do you see intent playing a role in them in a continuous manner, or is it?
That's a great question.
Right?
Yeah, it's not. I mean, I touched on this briefly before, but those organizations that are having the most success with intent data, they don't just use it for targeting. They're not like, okay, let's target these accounts for content syndication and programmatic, even if they're using it for that.
Sure.
They're continuing to look at those signals on a weekly basis to see how it's changing. Have those accounts gone, are the signals that they're surging on, is it more mid-funnel, the mid-buyer's journey now? They're looking more about solutions and not so much problems. All right. If so, then you want to follow up with them in a different way, maybe even switch them over into a different nurture track, or just make sure if they've been scored as sales ready and a BDR is about to follow up with them, make sure that BDR has the most up-to-date signals. They want to use those messages, those content, write an email that focuses on the intent signals that you're seeing now, not the ones that you saw a month ago, because this is a process. They will be further along in their buyer's journey than they were a month ago. So you want to keep reading these signals on a, preferably at least a weekly basis, so you could see how it's changed and what messages you should be using that are most up to date. Because
from the time you generated this, content syndicated leads to it reaching a BDR to follow, it might be 2 months, and their interest might have changed. So that's why you want to get the latest topics or competitors they're showing intent on to be relevant.
Right, and that goes back to what I was saying, that intent data has 2 general value props: 1 for targeting, 2, having that account intelligence, so you know how to follow up with them, what messaging, what content to use. But a lot of organizations still kind of fail to use that second value.
Interesting. No, that is great. So now let me ask you one final question, David. Now, given all the discussion, given the fact that you have been in the industry, you are in the industry, would you say you're hell-bent on intent?
Oh, definitely.
That's awesome. Cool. I wouldn't expect anything else from someone working at Intentsify. So very good. Awesome. Thank you so much, David. This was very, very helpful and very educational for me personally. I hope the audience finds a lot of value out of it.
Great discussion. Just to tell you, I'll probably get some shit for not thinking about the name Hellbent on Intent myself. I should have thought about that a year ago. That's a great name.
If you like this video, please drop us a like. Let us know what you think of it. And if you're hell-bent on intent, click on the link in description to stay updated when each new episode drops. See you there.